All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on Your Gifts Matter. My name is Aaron Solly from Engage Coaching Group, and I have a guest that I'm excited to share with you today and hear about their story and how they've accessed their own gifts. We have Monika Becker here today, and she's from Clear Directions Coaching, and she's also trained as a Dalian method facilitator. Hope I pronounced that right.
You did. Yes. Thank you,
Perfect.
Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you work with people that are facing challenges, or challenging transitions or stubborn issues in their personal, professional life. So things like fear, pain, self-doubt, overwhelm, or helplessness. So I think a lot of people can probably relate to going through those types of things. So I appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
For sure. And why don't we just start things off and share a little bit about more about who you are and where you've come from.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So my name is Monika, as Aaron said, and it's spelled with a K, and that might be indicating to my original roots, which are in Germany. So I was born in Germany. And I've grown up in a family of four. I'm the youngest of four. And I grew up in a beautiful family home with a big yard, a child's paradise, like lots of trees and plants and chickens, and it was really a beautiful setting and a fairly safe and protected upbringing in a small village outside of Bonn, which was our interim capital while Germany was still separated. So we had about 3,000, 4,000 residents maybe. So it was a really small and intimate and safe and beautiful environment to grow up as a child, for sure.
And how would you compare the culture there compared to Canada and growing up in Germany? What was that like as a child?
Probably like one of the biggest things for me, and other people may have other experience around it, is probably that, and we're probably known for that as Germans, that we can be a little bit rigid and very much adhere to our rules and standards, and you got to follow the rules and fit in and things like that. So I think that's probably one of the most important aspects for me that I enjoy more about being in Canada, where I felt more of a sense of freedom and being able to be different and not necessarily being quite as rigid. So much so that at the very beginning when I was here, I was totally upset when people showed up 5 minutes late for their appointments, right? Because you just don't do that in Germany, right? Like that's just a big no-no.
Yeah. So how did that rigidness show up? Like, was there struggles that you faced as growing up, dealing with that rigidness?
Oh, for sure, because I didn't give myself the freedom, right, to be me fully, and also I put that kind of like rigidness around what I expected of other people, right? That they should follow the rules, right? And yeah, I definitely cut into my own sense of freedom and flexibility and playfulness.
Definitely. Do you have an example of a situation where that really articulates that for you when you're younger or as you're growing up?
An example of that right now. Let me see. I'm throwing a blank, to be honest.
Okay. So a very rigid environment to be living in.
And well, in some ways, right? It's the culture. It's not to say that my parents were super strict, right? But that it was just like, it's kind of like almost like something that seeped into us as beings, right? Because it was just all around us, right? There were these unspoken and sometimes spoken out expectations, right, of people to fit in and not rock the boat and things like that.
And was that typical that parents would be as rigid as the culture per se?
Not necessarily, no, for sure not, right? And everybody probably brings their own story into their own history into culture and into the community. So no, for sure not. And I can't really say that my parents were super rigid. And I've been told by my siblings that over the years, and thanks to my siblings for that, like my parents had become much less rigid and more open and more liberal. So I basically benefited from my siblings fighting some fights on that front, right? And fighting for more freedom, right? So
Yeah.
So it's definitely my parents progressed as individuals as well, right? In that way.
And what was it like growing up with your siblings? How would you describe your relationships with them in that?
Yeah, no, we overall, like, we are very, even if we're not very tight, we can always rely on each other. And that's something that my parents have done a great job at instilling in us, that sense of being there for each other and having each other's back, even if we are not super, super tight, right? As a group of individuals. And for me personally, because I was the youngest of four, and that obviously was my experience and my interpretation, I oftentimes felt that I had to struggle in order to be taken seriously, right? And I felt that I wasn't listened to. So that's something that definitely carried into my adulthood, that sense of not being worthy of being heard, or just having struggles with making myself heard and feel that, okay, well, yes, actually people do hear me, they do perceive me, they think that I have something to say, right? So
In those moments where you felt like you weren't heard,
mm.
how did you cope with that? How did you?
Well, there was a little rebel in me, like I wanted to make myself heard, but then probably, and I made it, tried to express that, but then I was sometimes ridiculed because it probably came out in a funny or silly way, or kind of in a needy way, right? That didn't necessarily make it easier for people, or didn't make them more inclined to actually give me the attention that I was longing for.
Yeah, and how did
So,
you respond to that ridicule? Like, how did you
well,
take
I
that in?
probably, like, most of my time, most of my life, I think what I've done is then probably withdraw and
Mm,
keep it inside, right? To kind of like more internalize it and think, okay, well, that's just what it is. I wasn't necessarily a big fighter in that way, right? So I was more a person that would withdraw and internalize things, and maybe feel a little sad, or yeah, definitely not very worthy.
right. And did that like when did you move to Canada?
It was actually in 2002. So at age 40, there you go.
Okay.
It's out now. How old I am, do the math. I came here at age 40 after the previous year. I had booked myself a vacation, a summer vacation, and I already, before I actually came to Canada for that vacation, I had that gut feeling that something was going to happen. And during those few weeks that I was here, I felt a very strong pull to come back to Canada, because I used to live here for 2 years in the early 90s with my former boyfriend, and fell in love with the city and the country, but I wasn't ready to stay here. Went back to Germany for 10 years and then moved for good in the fall of 2002.
And that coping mess, like I guess the struggle of trying to fit in, and then struggling to use your voice,
Mm-hmm.
and stepping into that with coping it with through withdrawal. Did that show up again when you were in Canada in a new culture?
Yeah, it did
Yeah,
to some degree, for sure. But then
yeah,
also I felt just freer here. I felt that it was
yeah.
more inviting to show up as me. So I slowly also developed some courage to explore myself more deeply, and to just express myself. And to give you an example, right, especially to my struggles with making myself heard, I think in 2003, I ended up joining a spiritual community called the Center for Spiritual Living in Vancouver. And that was a milestone for me, or a big stepping stone for me, to first of all restart my journey inwards, and to actually talk about spirituality again, or look at that. And then, because it was a very vibrant community, people were singing and dancing even throughout the services. Eventually, I started to sing again, which I had done as a child and as an adult as well. And over time, then I developed my voice, not only my singing voice, but also just I became more courageous to actually speak my truth and say what I had to say. And it all culminated, and especially in the singing realm, by me actually writing a song and recording it. And also, in one particular incident, a few years after I joined that community, I actually sang a solo in front of 200 people. So that was kind of like me reclaiming my right to be heard, or just my courage to make myself heard. That's probably better, right? It's not that I'm entitled to, but I actually claimed it, right? So here's my voice, here's me, and here's what I have to say. And I was, yeah, people listened.
And if
Right?
somebody told you when you were, in your teens, that you would be stepping on stage and singing in front of 200 people, what would you have said?
You're freaking crazy. Never. Yeah, no, I probably couldn't see myself in that moment as a felt sense, because I probably was pretty insecure at that time. Although my dream would probably have been that, because I always wanted to be a great singer, right? Which I've never turned into, but that's beside the point, right? But there was always that duality in myself too, right? Like that inner conflict of actually physically feeling small and not worthy, but then there also being that little rebel, or maybe my natural and true self, who thinks, well, everything's possible. I want to be a great singer.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did it take to go from not singing at all, or maybe doing a little bit, but not to the point where it's public, right? And then get to a place where you're able to stand on stage? Like, how did share a little bit about how that journey was for you?
Well, it definitely, like, and that's probably the central point of my message overall that I want to share with people more and more, is that it had to go through my inside, through my internal explorations. So I think through the exposure and the life in the community, the spiritual community, I was encouraged to more like ask those questions again, like, who am I really? Like, who am I? Right. And to have those explorations. And then through that process, I gained a better sense of self and developed the courage to actually say who I am and speak my truth and make myself heard, even if it took courage, even if it did feel uncomfortable, right? And that's probably one thing that really helped me, that in the end there is, you can call it stubbornness or a sense of persistence, that I'm not easy to give up, right? So I just kept pushing forward, and also I needed help too, right? So I did some counseling and some coaching myself and talked to people and whatnot, right? So ask for support, but also go inside and really explore who I am, and then own that more and more, right? In tiny little baby steps here and there. Practice to say what I had to say, negotiate for a better wage or whatever it was, like little exercises here and there that helped me to then gain that more solid sense of self and confidence.
Yeah, well, what I hear is interesting is that you actually were going inside when in the moments of withdrawing, right? In those
Yes.
moments of struggle and withdrawing, you actually were going inside, but maybe didn't have the roadmap or the steps on how to go inside yourself, right? And so how would you describe those steps to know, okay, I'm recognizing I need to now really look at who I am. What are how does one do that? How would you?
Well, there are tools, for example,
Yeah.
like meditation, right?
Yeah.
Like even just sitting still and observing how the thoughts come in, but also then go back to the breath and really be still and be okay with being by yourself and not constantly busy and distracted, which was one of my default coping mechanisms before, right? When I was withdrawing within myself, but I wasn't really like effectively or constructively withdrawing. It was more like being silent rather than saying anything and feeling stuck, right? But this kind of internal reflection or looking inside that I'm now referring to was more being proactive and actually explore. So what does my inner life actually look like, right? And that took the courage for me to actually also become quieter from the inside out, and to also quieten down my external busyness that I had defaulted to before, right?
Yeah.
Which was not agonizing, but challenging, right? Because before I just covered up my uncertainties and my my doubts in just being busy, right? Being externally busy, being externally successful, always having something to do, so that I didn't have to slow down and look.
And did this struggle that you faced along the way, did it impact your career? Did you find?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I was probably underselling myself for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like when I was still back in Germany, and also when I was in Canada, but then it's slowly changed. But particularly in Germany, I I was basically, yeah, not speaking up enough, and because I was kind of like taught and brought up in a way of you follow the rules and you do what your superiors tell you. So I was basically also tolerating, that's the word I was looking for, some kinds of environments and being treated in certain ways that really went against my values and my own way of principles that I would like to live by, to the effect that eventually I became sick, right? Because I didn't live it out, right? That's my truth. And so, sorry, now I forgot what your original question was. Oh yeah, it affected my career, right? So in a way that I probably didn't achieve the kind of success and satisfaction that I could have achieved had I been more courageous and more secure in myself, right? So definitely it affected my career.
And did you say
And
it also affected your health? Like you became
yes.
sick?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
In
Yeah.
what way?
Like I became like, I developed this kind of like psychosomatic symptoms of just like for no reason whatsoever, I started throwing up. Right. That was
Right.
really like, I internalized the stress to a degree that my body said, okay, enough. Right. Enough is enough.
Yeah. The body physically was almost giving you signals
Enough
there,
of
right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I had
And
the same thing when I was here in Canada, right? So that I became like, in one of my positions that I held, I just became nervous every day that I went into work, and I had this knot in my stomach, right? And but at that time, luckily, I recognized it sooner, and I just had to extract myself
yeah.
from that position. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good awareness, right? To recognize, okay, this is, um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Yeah, I've
reason.
learned
There's a
it the hard
reason.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Right. Yeah. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
reason this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the power to extract yourself out of the situation
Yeah.
and approach it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So was there, like you mentioned, that there was a point where you got help and sought out counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and then you also joined the spiritual community that you're part of. It
That's right. Yeah.
allowed you to access your voice
Mm-hmm.
and that. Was there a turning point? Was there a specific turning point, or did it just kind of evolve that you started to go more inside and work on yourself?
Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, there was.
Yeah.
And so to give you the context, I started my business after I had been laid off about 10 years ago, and my coaching practice, that means.
What were you doing before
And
you were coaching?
I was like, originally in Germany, I was trained as a horticultural engineer. So totally different
Yeah.
thing. And I worked in sales and marketing for a tree nursery or tree nurseries in Germany and Canada for about 12 years. Then I moved into the travel industry, and I became a team lead in a call center in the travel industry. And I was laid off out of that position when the economy turned down in 2008. And that triggered the transition into becoming a coach, because that was something that I enjoyed as a team lead, was to actually have those one-on-one supportive conversations with my colleagues. So then in 2009, I officially opened my coaching practice. And then I also became a member of different business organizations and networking groups. And at one event, at a networking event, I came to know a Dalian method facilitator by the name of Kindy. And she had a display table, and we started talking. And I've always been open to all kinds of self-help tools and workshops and seminars up and down the yin yang, right? So, and I was just interested in what she had to say about the Dalian method. And I was intrigued by it and started to take the odd session with her, right, to support my own personal development. And then in 2017, just a year later, I hit an identity crisis, right? Like almost out of the blue, without any kind of obvious warning. I felt totally empty inside. I felt like I didn't know who I was. I had no vision for my life. I felt totally deflated and empty inside. And that's when I knew intuitively that the Dalian method would help me to dig myself out of that hole again. And that was a turning point for me, because then I started to seriously work with this particular tool and approach and method. And it has been a lifesaver, right? Because it really has turned my life around, and my perception of myself, my sense of self, and the way how I look at myself and the world.
It
So
sounds like,
that
yes.
was a turning point.
Yeah, it sounds like she showed up in your life at the exact moment that you needed it.
Yeah. And I brought the openness to the table. So between the two of us, we struck up a deal.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think you've highlighted some already, but if you were to summarize, so throughout this journey that you've been on, how would you articulate the gifts, those internal gifts that you were able to access along the way, even in the moments of the withdrawal and the sadness showing up, and that, like, what were the gifts that you were able to embrace? And
I think looking back at that, I think what I mentioned before, like that stubbornness or persistence for sure came up, and I accessed that, because giving up is just to the day, it's just not an option, right? So there was that gift of persistence, the gift of courage too, to actually eventually take a look inside, right, and face my dark sides and the lighter ones, right? So the courage for sure as well. Then my own creativity to not give up, and to just look for solutions and make them work for myself. That's for sure as well. And resilience, a sense of resilience, I would think, right? So which goes together with the persistence and the stubbornness, and to be open and have an open mind for new possibilities, and to be flexible, to adapt to new situations. So I think there were a number of, and really that access to my own inner wisdom and my own inner resources. I think that's one of the biggest gifts that I was given or accessed during all throughout those struggles, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like in your 40s is when it, which I think for a lot of people tends to be that time in our lives where shifts do happen. Right?
Yes, they do. They
do.
do.
It can be that turning point of, okay, I can either keep going the way I'm going, or I can actually decide to start to change my perspective and look at, actually commit to looking at, my struggles and my life differently, and actually embracing change, where sometimes change can feel scary. And,
absolutely.
There could have been a moment where you just decided to stay in the career path that you were on, right? But the things, the different indicators that happened, and the economic crisis, allowed for that shift to open up. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, and what since you're talking about the age thing too, like I feel like starting in my 40s, I'm actually starting every year, I'm starting to feel more myself and feel more solid, and I feel like I just care less about what other people think of me. Not that I'm totally done with that, right? But I think life actually started to get better for me personally, coming from my background of feeling withdrawn and sad and kind of like subdued. Like I feel like I'm starting to live more fully now, right? So if anybody of the listeners or viewers find yourselves in that situation, don't give up. Like I find life gets better as I get older.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that there's a positive side of stubbornness? Typically, we're told that don't be stubborn, right? Like there's almost a rule there that stubbornness is a bad thing, but there's resiliency in there, and there's persistence, which enables somebody that has passions and goals and drives that they want to achieve, that can, if you're embracing openness and creativity at the same time, look how far you've come, right? Yeah. So as we're recording this, we're in the middle of a global pandemic with COVID-19, and I'm curious, how you're helping people right now, and even beyond this, because we will get through this, but how are you supporting people through this right now?
Right. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, that's exactly what my coaching is all about, right? To help people in times of transition or in challenging times to, first of all, find more their own resources and access to their own solid self. And that's through coaching conversations, as well as through the work with the Dalian method, which is just a radically amazing tool on helping people access their own truth and their connection to their true self, which results in calm and peace and joy eventually. So that it's a combination of the inner and outer work that I do with people. And what I think what is my particular gift is that I can make these conversations very personal and practical. So people get help to look deeply inside on a very personal and unique and individual level. And then together with my practical German side and approach, we'll translate that into external action steps and successes and new ways of behaving in the world, right? So it's the both end. And of course, it's all determined by how much people are willing to look inside, right? Because obviously not everybody is ready to jump into the deep end immediately, but we can inch our way forward and take it one step at a time.
And did you find that you jumped into the deep end right away, or did you take kind of baby steps to get to where
I'm more the baby step person in some ways. Yeah. No, I had to learn to trust that method. I had to learn to trust myself, and no, I'm still inching my way into it, right?
And for people that aren't familiar with the Dalian method, what's a bit of history about it and a little bit more context around?
Yeah, so the Dalian method was created by a self-realized healer, which her name is Mada, Eliza Dalian. And in a nutshell, in a sentence or two, what it helps us do is to actually release those layers of suppressed thoughts and emotions that we all carry with us. Like bringing it back to myself, like when I was not being heard, not being taken serious, I probably thought 100 times over, like, I'm not worthy being heard. I'm just not worthy being taken seriously. Nobody listens to me. But rather than actually expressing it, I have suppressed them. And those thoughts and emotions that we suppress over our lifetime, they block our energy. So they take away our joy, they take away our creativity, and they eventually could also make us physically sick. And this method, through a combination of the Dalian method, through a combination of breathing, verbal expression of those repressed thoughts that we connect to in the process, and then physical body movement, very simple body movement, it helps us to actually energetically, physically, emotionally release those layers of thoughts, like a diamond in the rough, right? Like you peel off one layer after another, and inside there's this beautiful diamond, which we all have, which is our true self. So one layer at a time, we'll get more. That true self gets to shine through more. That's hopefully an easy enough way to explain what the method does in its unique, very unique way.
Well, it from what you've said, it encompasses not just logic, right? It's looking at the emotional side, the physical side, and I think I know from my own experience, sometimes we can get stuck in, I just can think my way through this, right? And there's a logical reason for what's happening, and there comes a point. I'm so glad you.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, there comes a point where you're realizing, okay, and that speaks to the idea of having to go inside ourselves. Is the logic? The logic is important, but it can only get us so far on its own. It has to be used in combination with emotions.
And that's actually the beautiful thing about the Dalian method. The core process totally bypasses the mind.
Right.
And that's its unique gift to us, because our mind is what gets us into trouble to begin with. So it will never provide us with the true and the effective solutions, right? So by bypassing the mind, we're actually accessing our intuitive and our true wisdom, which then using the capacity of our mind, we'll translate that into external action steps, and we then can make sense of it. That's where the mind comes in again, and it's a beautiful tool to have. But to actually find our solutions, our internal wisdom, our mind is totally in our way. And the Dalian method actually bypasses it in that process by focusing on our body, our breathing, and our internal wisdom that just organically comes up.
Yeah, and I love the analogy you used with the diamond, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, that solid self that's within us that can't be penetrated, right?
Nope.
These qualities, these gifts, you talked about courage, resiliency, openness, creativity, like those actually can't be taken away from us.
Nope.
They're always inside of us,
Mm-hmm.
and solid as a diamond, right? They're always there, and it's just a matter of mining it out, if you will, and allowing it, the light to hit it, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Uncovering it again, right?
Uncovering it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how can people find you and reach out to you if they're looking to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's probably the best access point is my website, which is Cleardirections, that's a plural with an S at the end, .ca, Cleardirections.ca, and that's Clear Directions in one word. There's my phone number and email address right there. There's a contact form that you can fill out. And if you feel so inclined, there is also a contact form for a complimentary and no obligation clarity session, which is a 45 to 60-minute conversation where we are establishing where you're at right now in your life, where you want to be, and to see what might be missing for you or what's in your way of actually achieving your goals or getting to that point that you say you would rather be, right? And there's probably the best access point for me is the website.
And where's your practice based out of?
I'm in North Vancouver, and nowadays, especially through COVID, my practice is online internationally. So I have worked with clients in Europe and in the United States, and basically, if we can find a time that works for both of us, we can work globally.
Yeah, so geography is not an issue. Definitely online these days you can help people virtually, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
that's great. I appreciate you sharing that.
You're welcome.
More about your practice and that. So in closing, if for people that are listening today that maybe are looking for just one key way to help start to move towards that inner journey, that perhaps they're at a place where you were at, where there was a little bit of openness there. They're not ready to jump into the deep end yet, but what's one key thing they can do today to start moving forward and accessing their gifts fully?
Right. Thank you for asking. So one thing definitely is I invite you to look for that clarity session, right, that we can go through. And then, or separate from that, there is actually a very short version of the Dalian method. It's called Find Answers to Your Questions. It's only 17 minutes long, and you can access it on the Dalian method website, which is madadalian.com. And like to the people that are just listening to the podcast, I'm just showing a little package which has the USB stick for the Find Answers to Your Questions session on it. And it's a very affordable and accessible tool because it takes only 17 minutes. And it helps you to actually, again, bypass your mind and find your intuitive and real answers from within your inner wisdom for any kind of practical question to really deep questions. So what's the purpose of my life, right? Or what am I supposed to be doing in this and that situation, right? So that's a really nice, neat tool that can help you to get going on that inner exploration and to get to know yourself a little better.
That's great.
Some perspective.
And what's the website again? How would you spell the
URL? Mada is MADA, and the name Dalian is DALIAN.com. It's again one word, madadalian.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Monika. I really appreciate you having you here today. and hearing about, specifically how you access your gifts of courage, of openness, of creativity, resiliency, and the power of stubbornness, right?
Yes.
and this whole idea that you don't have to jump into the deep end, that you can start to go take that journey inside, and take small steps along the way. So I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and for your great questions and the opportunity to share my story.
You're welcome.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.